Hello, and welcome to this episode of the World Discord podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Joel Ostrow.
Hello, Joel Ostrow. I'm your other co-host, Brian Endless, and how are you on this fine day in the Chicago area?
I'm doing all right. It's a little early. Actually, it's not that early, but the coffee for
Yeah,
some reason is not kicking in today. Oh
that's a
well.
you problem.
That's a me problem. Yeah.
Let's not take it out on the listeners.
Why not? Should we just
What do
bomb
you
her
think
on?
about it? There are songs about that. They're rude.
There are. Yeah. Old ones.
All right. Well, we're talking about military today, so why don't you
We
get us
are.
started, and hopefully we won't be bombing around.
Yeah, so we continue with our Who Benefits series. Who is profiting off of this increasingly fascist regime in the United States of America? And today we're focusing on Brian's favorite topic, the military industrial complex, because he's a conspiracy theorist, as am I, aren't we all?
It's only one of my favorite topics.
It's only
way,
one. This is
there.
true. This is true. But given how central the military industry is to our capitalist system, it's pretty high up there, I would say, for both of us. Interesting piece of news that I read today is that for the first time since the end of the Second World War, the deficit in the United States of America exceeds the size of our total economy.
Yep.
And this is a deficit ballooning is a longstanding feature of the Republican Party, which bases itself on disinformation, right? They claim to be the deficit hawks and the conservative economists, and they're the most profligate spenders in the most unproductive areas.
During their presidencies and down during the Democratic presidencies. I don't know how that
happens. So as an example, in the last year of the Biden administration, fiscal year 2024, the defense budget was around $840 billion. The 2027 defense budget is $1.5 trillion. So they've pretty much doubled it in the span of a year. And that does not include substantial amount of money spent outside of that standard budget, and I know you'll want to talk about that. The military is benefiting enormously from this regime that campaigned on America first and not getting involved in, as they call them, endless wars. But as MAGA and the Republican Party have been fond of for decades, they are warlike. We have been conducting military operations in the Pacific, across the Caribbean, overthrew a regime in Venezuela, have been conducting various bombing raids in Nigeria and elsewhere in West Africa, and of course twice
you make it sound
Iran.
Really militant.
Huh?
You make it sound really militant.
Yeah. So why don't you take over from there and tell us just how militant we are?
Sounds
You're
good.
the one with the swords in the back, by the way.
It's true. Yeah, no, that is a telling sign.
Yes.
So I want to take us back in time to where we started really talking about the military-industrial complex, which was the end of Dwight Eisenhower's presidency. Eisenhower, our great leading general during World War II, the hero who becomes president a few years later, president through 1961. In his farewell speech, and I want to quote from this one because it's that important, he told us that, quote, "We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist." This wasn't the first time the term was used. It was coined earlier, but he's the one who made it popular, certainly.
Through that warning, really,
Exactly.
is what brought it to consciousness. And given who he was, that
Exactly.
It was really a startling warning. And the campaign around the missile gap and all of that, I think, really concerned him in 1960.
Yeah, it did. And Ike saw this really, really early to what the military industrial complex could do. What he was talking about is a combination of a few things where there is an enormous amount of influence in our country and in our government by the companies that are in this military industrial complex, the top 100 defense companies, and really the top 5 defense companies: Lockheed Martin, RTX, formerly Raytheon, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, and Boeing are the 5 biggest. They have an enormous amount of influence, and it comes from a bunch of places. The first is that if you are running for Congress or Senate or president, you can't look weak on defense. And they have pumped a lot of money into the idea that you can't look weak on defense. And if you're not going to spend the money, they will make you look weak on defense by pumping more money into it. If you look weak on defense, you lose your primary or you lose your general election, both because the US people don't want someone who's weak on defense. This is,
That's right.
US people want to be defended. By the way, Joel, I don't know about you, but I want us to have a strong defense to protect our country. How about you?
I want us to have a strong defense to protect uh, American values, traditional American values, what the United States used to stand for. I don't really want a strong military if we're going to be a fascist regime, but that's another thing.
Yeah,
And also
exactly.
to defend our allies and the democracies around the world.
Yeah, we've
Speaking,
got
I
it.
jump in.
Go
Speaking of
ahead, please.
democracy, so part of Eisenhower's concern was the connection between um, our democracy and the rising influence and power of military industry. Those candidates for office have people who are working in jobs and factories that produce those weapons, produce the ammunition,
Absolutely.
or serve in uniform. And their voters have an interest in those jobs and in
Yep.
the budgets around those jobs. So you can understand the electoral pressures, particularly at the level of Congress and even
Yeah.
Senate. When I worked for Senator Dodd, I saw it in Connecticut. Electric Boat, that the submarine manufacturer in Groton, Connecticut, had enormous influence because it was a huge employer in the state and a source of revenue for the state and
Right.
for communities, for schools. So
Yeah.
that importance is what worried him, right? Because
Yeah,
of how
absolutely.
democracy works.
Yeah, it's not just lobbying and pressure. It is democracy. You're right. These are huge, huge employers. So one of the things we find that's a problem with the military industrial complex is once you've got a factory or manufacturing plant industry in your district, you can't afford to let it leave. So we
Right.
have Congress people and senators fighting to keep things in their districts, in their states, governors fighting to keep things in their states, even if we don't need those things. So you might have a fighter jet that's outmoded, and you'll have people in Congress fighting to keep funding it, even though the military may not want it, may not care about it,
And
because
many
it's a
instances in
huge
the
job.
past of Congress approving weapons that the branch of the military to whom they're going didn't request and doesn't want. We've had fighter
Exactly.
planes produced that the Air Force did not want. They
Yep,
didn't meet the
absolutely.
requirements. Yeah,
And that's all part and parcel of this.
yeah,
That's all a piece of it. And we have these companies making huge profits off of it.
correct.
But there are also people with jobs. So all that's important. And then there is a lot of lobbying that goes on. There's a revolving door from the
Mm-hmm.
Defense Department to the military contractors, where once you have done your 20 years in the military, you may go off and get that plush job with the military contractor, and you keep all your contacts in the military, and you use those contacts to make more money for your bosses and for yourself when you do
That's
it.
right.
So there are a lot of things that go into this. Let's look at some of the just big picture numbers. Last year, the 100 top defense companies earned a record $679 billion in annual arms revenue. Profit margin like 11 to 13%. That's tens of billions of dollars in profit just
These are
from that.
weapons manufacturers, right? Just to be
Exactly.
clear, so people aren't confused. We're not talking about military personnel, soldiers
Nope.
deployed around the world. Right?
Just weapons, and we'll get into the
Just
soldiers
weapons.
too, because that's going to be important.
Yeah,
This is defense contract spending, so
yeah.
this is the Defense Department that is pumping money, our taxpayer dollars, into those companies. And it's a direct line from us to through the government to the defense contractors. We're talking huge dollars that they've
Mhm.
routed 2020 to 2024, $2.4 trillion just in primary contracts from the Pentagon. And there are lots of side contracts that go on throughout the year. It's peaked in 2024. Once we get the numbers for 2025 and 26, it'll be higher. 2024, 995 billion. This year's original budget was 1 trillion, and the estimates with the Iran war are now it's going to be over 1.5 trillion. And by the
Are you
time
talking
we're
about the
done,
supplemental spending
the
here?
supplemental budgets too. Yeah,
Yeah, why don't you
absolutely.
talk a little bit about the difference there? Because
Yeah, so
there's the
this is big and most people never see it. You
right.
hear about the defense budget. They argue about the defense budget in the news, in Congress, and we fight at the beginning of every year about what that's going to be. The president lays out a defense budget. But then what most people don't realize is many times during the year, Congress will pass supplemental budgets. They are usually passed very quietly. They usually get majorities. They usually get very little news. And
Unanimous
they can
consent in the Senate, usually, right? Yeah.
exactly. And they can amount to hundreds of millions of dollars
Billions.
each time they do this. Well,
Yeah.
billions total. And you look
Yeah.
at the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war together, those are someplace from $4 to $8 trillion was spent.
Yeah.
And we say someplace from 4 to 8 because with all of these side contracts, we don't actually know exactly how much went into them. A lot of
Correct.
this is discretionary spending. So we just don't
It's
know
very
where
shadowy.
exactly. We don't know where all this money is
And
going.
and just to set up this episode, why we're talking about this with the Iran war, the U.S. military, many reports from anonymous from Pentagon officials and military officers in all three branches, um, extremely concerned about the depletion of weapon stocks. That depletion of weapon stocks requires replenishment and purchase of ammunition, rockets, cruise missiles,
Absolutely.
Patriot interceptor missiles, basically all kinds of weapons across the board. Uh, and those aligned with this regime are the CEOs of these major defense contractors that are going to
The
profit
Trump
from this
regime is what
war.
you're talking about, by the way, when you say
Correct.
this regime.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
We're
they're going to
talking
profit off of it, profit to the tune of trillions of dollars.
right.
In the
There's really no doubt now that this particular war, while it's only in the hundreds of billions now, is going to cost trillions of
Oh yeah.
dollars by the time it's all said and done. Let's jump back just a little bit. This whole episode is from beginning to end about who benefits. And this is the side we don't think of with the military industrial complex
Right.
that Ike wanted us to think of. And he was very honest about it. But the military industrial complex and the politicians who generate these profits for them and whose districts benefit from it want to detract from this idea that someone is benefiting. We
Right.
used to call this war profiteering, and it was a
Yeah.
bad
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
It was supposed to be a
Yeah.
gigantic negative that people
Yeah.
profit off of war. Now we fight wars for profits.
Right.
There's no reason we should be fighting a war in Venezuela. That was a war of choice. There's absolutely no reason we should be fighting a war in Iran. And okay,
Zero
somebody
reason.
out there's going to say, well, we got to keep Iran from getting nuclear weapons.
Yeah. We've talked
You know
about that.
what?
Yeah.
Iran wasn't getting nuclear
Right.
weapons. And
Right.
people who follow Iran have been following it since 1992. And the hawks who want to spend money have been saying since 1992 they're getting weapons. More importantly, though, the Trump administration,
Yep.
6 months before the current war in Iran, got together with Israel and literally bombed the hell out of the Iran nuclear program.
Yeah.
At the end of that very brief bombing campaign, the United States government announced we had set the Iranian regime back 20 years on their nuclear program.
I believe obliterated was the word they used.
Obliterated.
Although then it came out that we hadn't really destroyed much of anything, it turns out.
Don't tell anyone.
Right.
But 6 months later, there's this existential threat
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
They must be Houdinis. They're absolute
Hmm.
geniuses that they come up with
Hmm.
this stuff all the time. These are wars of choice, and
Correct.
a big reason for the choice is somebody's profiting, somebody's benefiting, and that's the group we're talking about right now, is the military industrial complex.
We will
Um,
talk about other groups in future episodes. Obviously, the
Absolutely,
energy producers are making out like bandits with gas at $5.50
absolutely.
a gallon here in the
Um,
Chicago area. So, but that's
let,
for a
let's
future
be
episode.
let's be clear here on percent of the federal budget. The
Yeah.
federal budget has what's called non-discretionary spending and discretionary spending. The non-discretionary spending is the money we have to spend. It is Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid.
Entitlements is the
And
money to which we are
entitlement,
entitled because we have paid into those programs with our payroll taxes.
pre-existing commitments. You know what
Yes.
percentage of the budget those are, Joel?
Isn't it around 2/3?
Actually, it's almost 75% of the budget.
Okay, so it's gone up.
73 to
Yeah.
75% in any given year
Mhm.
is non-discretionary. Other than that, the discretionary parts of the budget that Congress and President make decisions on is, 25, 28%. And in any given year, 15 to 20% of total US spending is on defense, is on
Right. So
defense
that's
outlays.
roughly 80% of that discretionary
the,
spending.
the vast, vast,
Yeah.
vast majority of our
Yeah.
discretionary spending.
Yeah.
And it is a huge share of the national debt is spent
Yeah.
on defense, and the national debt builds up because of defense spending. So it's absolutely insane. So who started it
But that's
all?
the budget, and the the annual budget includes uniform personnel, right?
Correct.
And really the bulk of this who benefits profiting is from that supplemental spending for weapons procurement throughout the year,
Absolutely.
right?
Let me be
And
perfectly
it's
clear on a
shadowy.
personal side.
Yeah.
A personal side. I would love to see uniformed personnel have 4, 5, 6, 10 times the spending that we put on them right now.
Correct.
We should
And veterans.
absolutely increase it. And veterans, 100%. We don't give uniformed personnel the equipment that they need. We don't give
Correct.
them the training that they need. We don't give them the health care that they need. We don't support their families.
And
There are
we don't
way
support
too many.
veterans at all.
Exactly.
We
Way
treat
too
them as
many enlisted
disposable.
personnel, though, who have to be on food stamps. Their families are
Yeah.
living on food stamps
And
at home because
homeless. Yep.
we don't support them. And yet,
Correct.
veterans care is absolutely horrific. This isn't a left or right issue. This isn't a Democrat or Republican. Congress doesn't fund it, and everybody else in the country hates the fact that Congress doesn't fund it, but
Correct.
Congress funds the companies. We don't
Hmm.
vote on veterans care.
Hmm.
Most of us don't vote on whether veterans get care,
Yep.
whether current troops get care. And then the other side that's come in, we're just talking about the big companies that provide weapons. Now, one of the biggest expenditures on the military is for services.
Yeah.
And ever since the Iraq War, the 2003 Iraq War, we've seen countries like Halliburton. Dick Cheney, vice president, used to run Halliburton, and they're now doing everything for the military except the fighting. They're providing food service, they're providing cleaning, they do the laundry, they set up the buildings, they even do security, not just
It
on
provides
military.
security for the bases for the
Exactly.
military. It's
They
wild.
provide security for our embassies around the world. I've
Yes.
got friends who've worked in embassies, and they,
Mhm.
to a person, when you talk to them about it, say one of the scariest things, no matter where you're working, is that you have people like Blackwater Security
Yeah.
who are guarding you, not
They'd
U.S.
much
Marines.
rather have Marines doing that than
100%.
Blackwater.
They
Yeah.
want U.S. Marines there.
Because they're trained.
Right. Well, and they're not just trained on how to defend, they're trained on how to de-escalate when the
Correct.
population
Yeah.
does
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when you're in a convoy and you're going out to some place as a diplomat, they're in the convoy defending you.
Yeah.
Marines are there to look scary and make sure that people don't get too close and make
Right.
sure that they identify the good people from the bad people. Blackwater has been known to just shoot at people if they
Right.
think somebody comes too close to the
Right.
convoy.
Right.
And that's horrific for the diplomats involved. It's just not good for them, not good for the country. And that's
Yeah.
a tiny, tiny example. But we have contracted all of that out. We used to have people in the military doing it. We cut the funds, which was cheaper for the military to do it. And we now give gigantic contracts to private contractors who make profits off of it and who don't just pay for it but make profits. So
And the the heads of those contracting companies, those companies are closely tied to members of the Senate Armed Services
Absolutely.
Committee, and administrations, Democrat and Republican, but
Yeah.
very closely intertwined
Now,
with
this
the
is one of
Trump
the first
regime.
times, and we'll talk about it. The Trump administration has gone above and beyond in creating those ties.
Yeah,
The Trump administration is really the first one to be appointing billionaires to jobs that control
right.
this stuff. Everybody else had billionaires involved and advisors and gave campaign money. That was there on both sides. But now we are a plutocracy where the billionaires are running departments in the
Are
government.
running the government. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And not just Elon Musk
in
and
their
Bezos,
own
all the way up
interests.
and down,
Yeah,
100%. All of this goes back to Ronald Reagan in 1981, or the buildup started with Ronald Reagan. He increased our defense budget by about 60 to 70% in order to beat the Soviets. And we won the arms race with the Soviets. We outspent them, which honestly, I'm kind of glad the Soviet Union went away. I'm grateful to Gorbachev that it went away peacefully instead of violently, because that could
yeah.
have
I'm not
happened
sure I
too.
buy the argument that Reagan's, uh, at the time, that was the largest peacetime military buildup in human history.
Yep.
That's going to be exceeded now with the Trump budget,
But
uh,
are we really at peace
MAGA
now?
budget. What's that?
Are we really at peace now? Now we're in war.
Yeah, that's true.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, I and many others dispute the notion that that caused the Soviet Union to fall. Perhaps it had something to do with accelerating the fall, but the Soviet economy was in a rapid tailspin even without Reagan's
100%.
military spending.
I'm on the side that it accelerated and was the push that went over, but I don't think we're going to disagree much if we, spent an hour talking just about
No,
that. We'd come to
yeah,
similar conclusions.
let's not spend an hour
So
talking about that.
Reagan saw huge growth, and we've
Yeah,
seen every administration since then. Democrats tend to have tiny growth, Republicans tend to have bigger growth. Everybody grows the defense budget.
yeah,
It's just something that presidents and Congresses do, and you can pretty much count on it. Another thing we haven't talked about is defense contractors make gigantic amounts of money off of selling things to other
yeah.
countries.
Hmm.
And this is for US contractors over $300 billion a year. It is in two different ways. It's foreign military sales and direct commercial sales. Those foreign sales are the US government sends things to other governments, and then the US government pays for it, and that comes out of our taxpayer money and goes to other
Right,
governments. And then direct sales, the US government gives permission for the contractors to sell things, because you're not allowed to just sell our best
right,
weapons to other
right.
countries. You have to get permission to do it. But those are huge amounts of money. Joel, do you know the two countries that get the most from the US in defense contract money every year, and they have since 1979?
Well, Israel's number one,
Israel is number one. Do you
and I
know
think
who
number
number
two is
two is?
Cameroon. Am I right?
It is not. That
It's
was
not
a
Cameroon.
terrible, terrible guess.
Ah,
And
bad guess.
no, it's not. I don't even know if they get anything from us. That's kind of
No,
interesting. No, number two
Egypt.
is Egypt. Because
Yeah,
of the Camp David Accords, when Israel and Egypt made peace, the US, and this is, again, I don't think that the idea of helping this make peace is bad. We started giving them, Israel and Egypt, equal amounts of money in different ways, but we gave them equal amounts of contracting since then to not favor one and to encourage them to keep peace. And that's a big part of peace in the Middle East. So there's some positive there, but that's also a gigantic amount of money to two states where the militaries are not always used to good effect, and that they're using their militaries to harm people in many ways. And the
probably more
United
so Israel than Egypt at this
Yeah,
point.
the U.S. puts out. Egypt always had a authoritarian state,
Yeah,
certainly, but not to the extent of Israel and the Palestinian territories,
yeah,
in particular, in the way they use military there. And that's another episode that we've done in the past, and we may do again in the
indeed.
future. But there's money that goes in all different directions, and then we get down to the Trump administration and what's happening right now. And this is again the first administration where the Trump and his family and their cohorts, their cronies, have been bold enough to just do stuff in public. They don't even pretend anymore. They
Right.
sometimes use some words, but not very many. So, as an example, among other investments, they have Don Jr. and Eric have heavy investments in one of the primary countries companies that makes drones and drone parts, and lo and behold, government contracts start going to those companies. Peter Thiel, who's the billionaire behind J.D. Vance and behind Trump in a lot of ways, has gigantic investments. Many billionaires have AI investments that are going into military industrial complex.
And
Uh,
much of that explosion this year of the Pentagon's budget is going towards AI and the use of
absolutely.
AI for defense intelligence, targeting all sorts of things, with already demonstrated uncertain results or even
Yeah.
poor results, as evidenced by many of the things that have gone on in our attacks on Iran,
Yep.
and failed attacks and failed defense against attacks.
And
But that
predictive
is enormously
results too.
expensive, and AI and the Trump regime are very tightly intertwined. The major AI companies, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely. The big one too is Feinberg, who's the second highest ranking official at the Pentagon. He's the deputy secretary at the Pentagon, is a billionaire. And
Yep.
Joel, you might ask, why is a billionaire taking a lowly job at the Pentagon?
Brian, why is a billionaire taking a, well, it's not really lonely, isn't it? Lowly, he's number two. But why is he taking a
Yeah,
job at the Pentagon?
it's kind of lowly. I mean, he probably has a salary of what, 140,
Yeah, but
$150,000 a
as you
year.
know, billionaires don't make money from salaries.
Oh, that's right. That is
Ah,
understandable. And who knows? He
yeah.
might even donate it all back because he's a good
Yeah,
guy
right, sure.
making
Great guy.
billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Steve Feinberg was the chair and founder of Cerberus Capital Management, and it's a private equity firm. He's still heavily involved with it. They control four of the largest companies that awarded contracts. They have a strong controlling interest in them. And Feinberg now oversees the office in charge of the Golden Dome for America project,
Yeah.
which is
Hmm.
effectively Star Wars 2. If those of you
Hmm.
remember Ronald Reagan's Star Wars that never amounted to anything and spent billions of dollars, the Golden Dome is intended to mimic Israel's Golden Dome, which has had some successes with some types of weapons. But to be clear, folks, Israel's Golden Dome doesn't work against intercontinental ballistic missiles. And
No, it does not, because they are
that's what
not
the
threatened
U.S.
by those.
Yep, that's what the U.S. cares about, and that's what it's being advertised. It's going to protect us, and
And
the
that's what it
Golden
will
Dome
not
is
work against.
no unlikely to ever work against it.
And the
So,
purpose of that Golden Dome project is actually, Brian, what?
to make money for certain companies,
For Mr. Feinberg and others like him. Yes.
exactly, and then
And who pays for it, Brian?
we do the U.S. taxpayers,
But who doesn't pay for it? People like Mr.
the billionaires.
Feinberg. Mm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, we don't just pay for it in our taxes; we pay for it in debt. That's the other thing. Do you know the number?
Woohoo!
I'm not sure. How much do we each owe in the U.S. debt right now? I think it was like
Oh,
three
I don't
hundred
know what the
thousand.
number is. I haven't
I
looked
think
at
it was
that for
three
a
hundred
while.
thousand per person the last time I checked it.
Something like that. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
each of our shares of the. And Steve Feinberg owes 300,000 too, by the way. But
Yeah.
he got billions out
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
our debt. So
Let
it's
me wait,
just
let me check. Did I
insane.
get, but nope, I didn't get billions
No, I
of
didn't get a
anything.
check. I still also haven't gotten my George Soros check for going to those women's marches.
Damn
I'm
it.
waiting for the Soros
Right.
check
Yeah.
to come
Yeah.
through. That never comes through.
No.
We can talk about the Iran war a little bit more. You got into some of that, and what are we looking at? Current rough cost that the government is saying is $24 billion. It's probably going to be closer to $29 billion in terms of official spending, but the true replacement costs and the true costs of the war are going to be enormously higher. You mentioned.
Hundreds and hundreds of billions. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have cranked through our supply of Tomahawk cruise missiles. We have
About 80% depleted.
cranked through our supply of Patriot missile
About
interceptors.
90% depleted.
And it's us and it's our allies. These are things that are insanely important. The number
These are
one,
things we actually legitimately need.
absolutely.
Well,
Patriot
if
missiles,
we are a
we want to
democracy
share with
defending
our allies.
democracies, right?
Yeah,
I
they
don't know that
stop.
MAGA sees that we need them, but most Americans who I think still would support democracy and we still
Yeah.
talk about NATO as our allies, uh, they need these things. We need
Yeah.
these things.
Well, NATO
If
NATO needs them. Ukraine needs them. We haven't been shipping them to Ukraine since this administration started.
we have
And
not.
right now, it's the countries in the Gulf that are burning through them because when we
Correct.
attacked Iran, Iran attacked our allies in the Gulf, and our allies have a ton of U.S. Patriot missile interceptors, and they have been
Which, by the way,
burning
we
through
moved
them.
from elsewhere in the world, like South Korea, to the Middle East before we started this war in Iran.
Yeah. Now, by the way, each Tomahawk costs about 3.5 million to replace. Each Patriot costs about 4 million to replace. The problem is, though, what was the
Each Patriot interceptor? I don't
yes?
think the interceptors are 4 million.
The machine might be 4 million, and the
No,
launcher might be 4 million.
so the launchers I think have 16 launch. So I think it's
Right,
um, a package of 16
is
costs that.
4 million.
Not yeah, yeah.
That makes sense. And how many of these can we currently make a year, Joel? Do you remember that number?
And so there's the media has been confused about that since the start of the Ukraine war. So an entire battery consists, if I remember right, of 8 launchers and um, what do you call it? Like radar system.
Reload. Right.
It takes about a year and a half to produce a whole battery. But a launcher, we can produce a couple of launchers for a battery, every year. And
But
we can produce hundreds of interceptors, thousands of interceptors.
a
Those are
couple
not
of
hard.
launchers every year and hundreds to thousands of interceptors, and we have used enormously greater numbers than
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
We're almost depleted of interceptor missiles for Patriots, right?
Yeah. So we're gonna. It's
We, and I
gonna.
say that means the world, because
Right.
we control all, even when we have sold. So every time we sell a Patriot system, uh, those contracts come with the right of the U.S. military to redeploy as needed for our own military purposes. So when Italy, for example, gets a Patriot system for their defense as part of NATO, we still can sort of reclaim those sort of eminent domain, which is what
Yeah.
happened to the we did to South Korea, and they're quite nervous because
Right.
those are protection against the North. Yep.
Exactly. So we've got enormous costs in years, not months, but years to just
Hmm.
replace the missiles that we have
Correct.
already shot off there. One of the problems that we're talking about is we've got our Navy that is outside of the Persian Gulf. By the way, in case people don't know it, navies don't go into the Persian Gulf to do combat. It's way too
No.
small. You sit outside of the Persian Gulf.
Hmm.
And you do things at a distance from there, but our Navy is running out of interceptors.
Yep.
We're not going to be able to intercept everything. So when people say, can we open the Straits of Hormuz? The estimates I've seen from retired generals are it would take 4 to 5 destroyers to go with every ship that goes through
Yeah,
the
that's what I
Straits of
read.
Hormuz. But
Yeah.
that counts on those destroyers having enough interceptors to knock down everything the Iranians send on them. We would
Correct.
quickly run out of interceptors
Yeah.
if we
Yeah.
actually tried to open the Straits of Hormuz. So that one's just not realistic, no matter how much we talk about it. It ain't going to happen through military means. That one's got to be handled politically. And then, of course, the other expense that everybody has talked about somewhat, but that we don't look at the cost of it, is drones. And we found out in the Ukraine war, and we're now finding out in Iran, that drones are the systems of the future. The Ukrainians make incredibly cheap drones. The Iranians make slightly more expensive, but still cheap drones. The United States right now makes incredibly expensive drones. And we're just starting to figure out how to make cheaper drones that can be disposed of as quickly as the enemies can. Every time they shoot down one of our drones, it's in the tens of millions of dollars. When we shoot down one of theirs, it's the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands.
And the Iraq War, the Iran War now is demonstrating that our very expensive drones are not particularly effective either.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. And this is one of those, we're behind. This
Yep.
is warfare of the future, and we are clearly behind. And then you look at the little stuff, like I understand the Ford aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, just finally came into port after a year at sea.
Mm.
Aircraft carriers are supposed to be out for 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
The Ford was working with only half their working toilets. The Ford had a laundry room fire that destroyed about 15% of the crew quarters, and they still didn't come
Wow.
home because they had to be on deployment. And that's, again, gigantic costs to keep those ships out on deployment. Costs in money, costs in personnel, costs in people who don't want to rejoin the military again,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is another
Yeah.
one of those factors that is out there. But overall, what are we talking? Hundreds of billions to trillions of dollars just in what we've done in the year and a half and the likely ongoing extra things that are going to happen. And I forget what the deficit's at now. Is it in the $30 trillion range? Is that
Something
right?
like that. That's at
I'm
45, I thought.
It could be. I'm going to actually have to look that one up real
Mm.
quick and see, since we have the Google, and we might as
And it
well.
is soaring daily. Like
Oh,
the
yeah.
accelerating growth of the deficit is unlike anything this country has seen in a long,
Yep.
long time.
Absolutely. Let's see. So U.S. debt is at $39 trillion
39 to 40. Yeah.
and soaring right now. And now we're adding trillions in a half year, in a
Yeah.
year. It's absolutely insane.
And
And that's
again,
not,
an enormous portion of that ballooning deficit is this military spending.
yeah,
Um, why are we not hearing concerns, complaints about this?
because of three words: military industrial complex. They come in
You're saying
and
we have a complex?
we do. We have a bad complex.
We
We've
have,
had it. It's been. We really should have got some acne cream after
yeah,
Eisenhower
yeah,
and fixed our
yeah.
complex after Ike, but we chose not to. Well, we didn't choose not to do it. The military-industrial complex has us over a barrel, has a catch-22, whatever the hell analogy you want to use, for all the reasons we talked about at the beginning. If you say you want to cut spending, you are weak. You are seen as weak. I've
Yeah,
seen projections from the Pentagon. They did them under Obama. They did them under the first Bush or second Bush action under W. Bush. There are Pentagon estimates that say we could cut our costs in half and still be incredibly safe. We have 10 times the military expenditures of our next nearest competitor, more than the military expenditures of our 10 nearest competitors, and only two of them are enemies out of the 10 nearest competitors. We spend so much money and we waste so much money every year. We could put it to enormously better use, as we talked about, funding the troops as opposed to the weapon systems that the military doesn't need. We could stop funding a lot of the experimental stuff that goes absolutely no place. We've got the F-35 that took forever to put together,
yeah,
and it's now almost outmoded by the time it comes into use. And excuse me, we could be doing things like cutting our nuclear defense. We could cut the number, the estimates, military estimates, not mine, are we could cut our number of nukes in half and still be just as safe. And keeping up nukes costs an enormous amount of money every year. So all of these things put together, but the money goes into people's political districts, and we got to keep the people safe.
I was trying to look up as you were talking, um, like in the S&P 500, how many of those top corporations are defense contractors, but I'm not having success finding it right
I don't
away.
think
But
I don't think it's that many, because the big defense contractors, there aren't that many big defense contractors. There are a lot
mm,
that are smaller, but now you got to count AI contractors
yeah,
in there too.
but
So
I would also posit that another reason we're not hearing about it is like who would who would we find analyses who would provide the analyses that would raise the concern? That's large media corporations,
oh yeah, absolutely.
and
So
their CEOs have investments in
exactly,
these companies and are making out like bandits
yeah.
from this
And they're on the boards of these
ballooning
companies,
defense
and
spending.
the people from
Yeah,
these companies are on the boards. The quick number
right.
I got was 10 to 14 aerospace defense contractors
Yeah,
in
that's what I saw, but
in the
it's
S&P
got to be
500.
more than that.
It is, but there are a lot of small defense
Yeah, there
contractors
are.
that feed into big defense contractors.
Yeah,
So when
yeah,
you look at all these AI companies as an example, there are only three or four, 5 gigantic AI companies,
yeah.
But then there are AI companies with hundreds of millions of dollars instead of billions who
Yeah.
feed in every year, or low billions instead of high billions who feed in every year to those
I
companies.
do
Same
want to
thing with
come
the
back to
stock.
something you did raise before, though. This Iran war and the pace at which we are depleting our weapons stockpiles. So there was already some strain, and much of the tension between uh, President Zelensky in Ukraine and the Biden administration was the Biden administration was trying to be responsible about our obligations to allies around the world and our
Right.
own security, legitimate security interests when we were a democracy, in not depleting our weapon stockpiles, and so was very careful about what we were sending to Ukraine and where those items were coming from, and also the schedule and pace of deliveries so that we
Yeah.
could not undermine our own defense. We've stopped sending to Ukraine altogether, uh, but our weapon stockpiles have been much more rapidly depleted by these ventures in Iran and sending weapons to Israel that has accelerated with Trump's return to office. The spending that's going to have to be done uh, to basically rearm is going to take years.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so this is like guaranteed massive spending to these companies for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
They were already going to get because that military industrial complex was already real, right? They already received hundreds of billions of dollars every
Yeah.
year if you add it all together. This is ballooned and will remain ballooned for the foreseeable future.
Military companies make money anytime there's a war in the world. They
Yep.
make a lot of money anytime there's a war between major powers using modern weapons.
Yeah.
Early estimates, and you may know these better, Germany was doing a lot to arm Ukraine, particularly with artillery
And is
and
doing a
missile
lot more now.
artillery,
Germany and France are. Yeah.
doing a lot more, but they were also depleting their stockpiles. And their Germany and France are now both building new factories, which are going to take a year to 2 years to build the factory because they understand they're not going to be able to keep up with the stockpiles in the future. So
And
they
they
have
can't
to.
trust the US anymore.
Exactly. So they have to not just keep spending, they have to make these companies bigger and build more infrastructure
Yep.
to do it. The military contractors smile all the way to the bank every time a lot of people die. And
Yeah,
that's that war profiteering question
for sure.
that is out there. I don't know if you have anything else. I've got a quote from the Reagan administration that I want to kind of close us off with. It,
President Reagan.
yes, Reagan, exactly. Well, Ronald Wilson Reagan, six
Mm.
letters in each of his name, 666. You
Yeah,
might
yeah,
see
yeah,
some
yeah.
references there.
Right. Yeah.
This was actually a congressman, and I was fairly young during the Reagan administration, college, and Congressman Dan Rostenkowski was my
From Illinois.
congressman. Oh, no, no, it wasn't. Nope, I apologize. My bad. Rosti was later. This was Phil Crane. Phil Crane was my
Also from
congressman.
Illinois. He was a
It's
Republican, very
from
conservative at the
Illinois,
time.
the weapons hog, the
Oh
military
yeah.
hog. Phil Crane didn't never met a weapon that he didn't
He
love,
didn't
never
like.
met a commie that he didn't want to kill. I
Yep.
will never forget a mailer I got from Phil Crane. This is when you got mail instead of emails. Phil Crane was fundraising, and the Reagan arms race was on, and we were increasing the budget. Phil Crane sent me a mailer that said the following: would you rather spend more money defending the United States or allow the godless commies to come in and kill our women and children? That is the military industrial complex in a
Yeah.
nutshell. That's the
And
kind of
now,
argument that.
now, well, you can insert instead of godless commies, there's all sorts of boogeymen
Exactly.
that the regime inserts, right?
Yeah, yeah. People that the
I don't
Russians
think
call.
Iran was coming to kill us.
People that Iran calls fascist in Ukraine, as an example, and the
Yeah.
Iranians, and by the way, Palestinians also not coming to kill us.
No.
They quite questions with Israel, but Palestinian reach doesn't go beyond that.
Yep.
We are, as we always do, sticking our noses in where they don't belong. We meddle, and it has a gigantic cost. And the one thing we didn't talk about is this is so different from Trump's first term. Trump did a
Oh,
180 on
right.
this. in his first term, you and I have talked about this. It was shocking how good a president he was at not starting foreign wars and at not putting, the kind of money that people had in the past into that. Everybody thought he'd do more, and he was very domestically focused.
But this revenge tour is entirely about enriching himself, his family, and his circle of friends and supporters.
Yep.
Everything this regime is doing is about that, and this war in Iran. In this episode, we've talked about the arms, the weapons production, the military-industrial complex side. We'll get to the energy sector and who's profiting from that. We don't care about Iran. We don't care about the regime in Iran. We, meaning the United States government, doesn't care about human rights in Iran, doesn't care about women's rights, doesn't care about children. I would suggest doesn't really care that much even about Israel. They just want to continue to enrich themselves.
Absolutely. And I always have to bring this up. This is the political science professor in me. People are dying.
People are
This
dying.
money kills people.
Yeah.
Every poor piece of profit is killing more civilians, killing more kids, and we are responsible. And now, by we, I mean the citizens of the United States
Yes.
who are letting this happen. And you might say, I
Yeah.
didn't vote for the guy, but then I would tell you, you didn't work hard enough to not let the guy get elected.
This
If
is
your guy
true.
doesn't get elected, work harder
Yeah.
and get more people out to vote. We can actually change this, but we don't.
Well, that's another question, I guess, for another day. But
Mr.
is
Cynical.
it do we have an electoral system that even allows us to change this anymore after the Supreme Court decisions?
Yeah.
Uh,
Unfortunately, I think we're going to find out fairly soon.
Unfortunately, yeah.
All right. Anything else, or are we done?
I think we're done. Uh, should we ask the stupid? Should I ask you the stupid question? How do we fix it if we can't fix it with elections?
I think that the only way that we can fix it is to educate and build a constituency and get to the point where some form of elections work. To me, if we don't have elections, we need numbers. If we have elections, we need numbers. And getting numbers means taking control of how information gets disseminated, getting information to people, building out networks. So, if you are convinced that our democracy is gone, we need to start fighting to get our democracy back. If there's a chance of getting our democracy back, we need to fight to get more people involved. And to do that, we have to educate people, which is in part why the World Discord podcast exists.
It
By the
is.
way,
I agree
this
with
is
you with
why
the
they've called
numbers.
me the hopeful one and him the cynical one, by the way.
Well, it depends. I mean, I'm incredibly hopeful and cynical at the same time. I agree with you on numbers. To me, the number is 3.7. You get 3.7% of the population on the street, then we get our democracy back.
Yep.
And that's hopeful because it should be doable. Like
Right.
the cynical part of me is what I'm seeing in reality, and no sign of that happening.
Right.
So that's where the
I
cynicism
think
comes
it
in.
is starting to build up, but it's still very much starting. And that's really the no kings and other stuff. Will this have legs? Will this be able to continue? Will this matter in 2026? These are all the things we're going to find out in a few months.
I guess so. I think we need to come together in maybe a slightly different way. I think we just need to come together and get in the streets.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. All right. On that note, thank you, Joel. Thank you, David, for producing. Thanks to all of you for listening, and we will see you soon.
Like and share, spread the word about World Discord.
Bye, folks.
Bye.